Should we just go ahead and
I'm
share?
I'm just starting the recording now, Lee. So thanks everybody for jumping on. In this session, we're lucky enough to be joined by Lee Stevens from Brighter Days over in New Zealand, and Lee's going to be talking to us about modern Office 365 governance. So something that's obviously super important, and especially at the moment. Lee, take it away. Looks like you've got a lovely background there, looking nice. With all the attendees, just remember, if you can just keep yourself on mute. If you've got any questions, then we can use the raise your hand functionality of Teams, but also you can open up the chat window. I'll be moderating the chat window and ask away in there as well. So look forward to the session, Lee, and over to you.
Okay, so let's share my screen. This is where I pray the technology works. Okay, so can everyone see the presentation as I would hope?
Not yet, mate.
Let's do this one now. Right.
Yeah, it's looking better. There we go.
Okay. Cool. All right. So welcome everyone. So it's 6 p.m. New Zealand time. So you're probably thinking I should be down the pub, and because obviously New Zealand's out of lockdown as well now, so we're free to come and go and do what we want. But I guess this session is going to be fairly light-hearted. I guess you've all had a grueling day of sessions, so we try and keep it as kind of light-hearted, and if you can ask questions along the way, that's all fine as well. So we're going to talk through some of the trends we're seeing in New Zealand. I guess there's a big New Zealand emphasis on kind of what we're doing, but obviously it should apply for all regions. We're going to talk about some of the things around data, where that's going, and some of the common mistakes we're seeing. I just caught the end of the last session about Teams. There's some good stuff, there's some bad stuff, and there's some downright ugly stuff that you probably need to be aware of. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about the sexy side of compliance. Now there's two words you probably didn't think would go together, but there's actually some nice options now in Office 365 and Microsoft 365 stack. And then we'll ask some questions at the end if we've got any questions as well. So just a quick introduction. So don't take this the wrong way. I would love to be talking about document management and records management at 6 o'clock on a Friday, but I shouldn't be here. I should be in Ibiza, DJing to my adoring crowds. So I actually studied media at college and got a job on a London radio show where I was on the breakfast show and used to help out the main DJs there, and stupidly gave it all up to go and work in a bank because I wanted some money. But yeah, that was where I should have been. So I always say I swap records from a different kind for records of a different kind, and that's my connection there. So, but that's my background. So obviously from a communications perspective, it's really good to be able to use some of those kind of core good communications principles that we got taught at college all those years ago. It's just obviously the forums and the way we do it's changed slightly as well. So in terms of the clients we work with, just very quickly, we work with predominantly the big clients in New Zealand, some familiar faces there that are obviously over in Aussie and around the world. But yeah, generally they're the ones who kind of get the most out of who we are, what we do. I guess we're all about workplace productivity as well. So we're all about making those large businesses more effective and more efficient. So they can actually be good for their, can be better and more effective for their customers. So we've been going about 3.5 years. And yeah, we really have sort of kicked on in the last 18 months, but we've now got 3 practices, and I guess this is probably aligned to how most of the other maybe vendors around the planet are working now. So we've got our modern workplace stuff, which is our SharePoint, our Teams, our Yammer, etc. But business applications is huge for us at the moment. So Power Apps and Power Automate, and we're lucky enough to have a chap called Richard Burdess, who's an MVP in this space, who works for us. So he joined us a little while ago, and he's doing some great stuff there in the Power Apps and the Power Automate space, which is a natural follow-on really for the work that we do in the SharePoint space. And then we also look after people's tenants as well. So more and more businesses are now moving away from their managed service provider, who they kind of see as the guy that gets under the desk and fix the cables, whereas we're now, we're actually managing the tenant and showing them all the benefits of what they're already paying for. So that's enough about me and the sales guy. Let's talk about some of the trends we're seeing. So this is probably similar to how you're probably seeing it around the globe. So we typically seeing, and pre-COVID especially, there's kind of 3 waves of adoption for people going to Office 365. So if you think about the first one, we're going to commit to Office 365. That's not as easy as it sounds. If you're a government entity or you're a large organisation, you can't just wake up one day and say, right, we're going to move all our mailboxes to the cloud. So actually getting them to that point is going to be quite hard for some organisations. Most of the clients we work with have done that. The second one is then establishing your core apps. So that's doing things like SharePoint, Teams and OneDrive in a fairly planned fashion. And then once you've got those 2, you can then start to look at forms and flow and other things. But generally, you've got to do the first 2 in the right order. But generally, that was a trend we saw. And I think most of our clients who we kind of work with are probably about getting close to doing that second box there as well. So let's talk about a structure. Now, this is a structure that we use, and by all means, if you want to get in touch, and I'm happy to share these slides, but this is a structure we've kind of landed on, which kind of just works for everyone we work with. The labels just end up being slightly differently, but the way we kind of work out our Office 365 structure is that we have organisation-wide sites. So that would be probably your intranet in old money, but we don't call them intranet sites anymore because they scare people. So we call them organisation-wide sites, and that can be a hub with many associated sites, but that's stuff where your policies, processes, guides, manuals, etc. should go. And then what we're seeing is that for anything like this departmental, for projects where there's only certain groups of people that need to be able to access that information, then Microsoft Teams is a viable choice now. And we've definitely seen 90% of the organizations we work with now use Teams instead of a SharePoint alone site. And then for personal stuff, we say OneDrive because that's just your personal stuff. If you do that, it's a lot easier to search, put some information architecture around your mega menu, etc. But compliance is a lot easier as well, because one of the things we also do is we've got a provisioning tool that we've built that provisions PRA and ISO compliant sites and teams. And there's a few ways you can do that, as I'm sure previous speakers have mentioned. So the governance and actually injecting metadata into Teams is something that we do. And then obviously having a good backup and recovery solution is wise as well. But that solution and that information architecture you see there is very simple, but I would say that 90 to 95% of our organisation we work with adopt that. But if you want a copy of that, just get in touch afterwards, and I'm more than happy to share your copy of that as well. So let's just talk about what some of our users over in New Zealand were thinking as well. I don't know if anyone's seen this tweet that went out. So, and I think this is not being really fair on IT, because IT cop it, right, about how little or how fast they've moved with Teams. But there's generally a populist belief that COVID-19 has shifted a lot of people towards digital transformation. So they've had to go on to Teams, they've had to go on to SharePoint Online, and the CTO didn't do any of that. But one thing I think is amazing is how quickly a lot of the large organisations were able to move on to Teams. And I think you've got to look at the good work a lot of IT departments were doing. But your users will think that COVID-19 was what pushed it along, which may be the case. Another thing that's probably worth mentioning as well is that not every user has actually been able to work from home. So I don't know if anyone saw this in the press or the news, but there was about 1,000 immigration New Zealand workers that were actually unable to work because their IT people couldn't work out a secure way or a secure way to remote work. So that meant there's 1,000 taxpayers' money, staff doing pretty much nothing at home for most part of lockdown. So I don't think it's a given that everyone was able to jump onto Teams, because the cautious types would have kind of held that back. Now, does this look like a familiar situation for some people? So this is probably my bedroom, but business as unusual became the new normal as well. So people had to start getting used to using Teams and using SharePoint Online and remote tools, right? So I think the business unusual now is probably the new norm, but generally it's kind of widely accepted in New Zealand now. Most people don't want to work in office 5 days a week. They might want to work from home 1 or 2 days a week. So we've definitely seen a lot more of that over here. Now, I thought was a really interesting stat as well. So I don't know if any of you guys saw this. So this I was following with great interest. So about the middle of March, we was probably just going into lockdown. over in New Zealand, and I was seeing quite a lot of information and news produced by Microsoft, which was around 44 million daily active users, which I didn't think was that much, but generally is still eclipsing Slack users. But one thing I thought was really interesting was literally less than 2 months later, the number of Teams users has gone up to 75 million, so it doubled almost in 6 weeks because of COVID-19. So that just goes to show you how widespread Teams usage is around the planet. And I guess no surprises, right? But just the sheer numbers of that surprised me, and I thought it was worth sharing those numbers with the audience. Okay, so I'm going to take it by the silence as well. I can't see the chat, by the way, because I'm presenting. So if you do have any questions, do just put your hand up, pop me in the chat message, and then presumably Daniel can jump in as well if he needs to. So any questions so far, Daniel?
No, not yet, mate. Not yet.
Okay, cool. All right.
Must be doing a good job.
All right, so let's talk about the Microsoft 365 rebrand, which has kind of confused quite a lot of people. And I don't know if anyone's kind of got their head around this, but I'll do my best to try and explain what's happening. So essentially, if you're a small organization or small user of Office 365, the reality is that you're probably going to start seeing it referred to as Microsoft 365. For the corporate world, Office 365 is still alive and kicking. However, Microsoft are now seeing this part as a bundle that gets included as part of Microsoft 365. So if you think about my Office 365 with Teams and SharePoint and OneDrive and Yammer, those are your kind of applications. But with Microsoft 365, which obviously has a separate licensing model, you now have access to these other kind of enterprise class IT services. So in a Microsoft 365 E5 license, for example, you get Windows as a service. So you get your latest version of Windows. Windows 7, Windows 8 is gone. You get Microsoft Intune to manage your devices. And then there's the 2 new modules, which Microsoft are really pushing hard, which will be relevant to this conversation, is identity and threat protection. So that's your real corporate enterprise class security, and then compliance. So how you do things like e-discovery and retention and that kind of stuff. So for any records managers on the call, you're now looking at that and going, well, maybe Microsoft can do that without the need for third-party tools or customization. So the compliance piece is a relatively new module, but the other thing that's probably worth mentioning is, well, you can buy each of these as a standalone module as well. So I think it works out roughly $15 per user if you just wanted to buy the information protection and compliance module as well as Office 365. But there's definitely once again, it's probably definitely worth getting your head around that, because you'll get your clients who will say to you, what's Microsoft 365, what's Office 365, what's the difference? So understand what those differences are. So one thing we saw as well, especially, was COVID-19. We spun up probably 10 to 20 of these sites in hours. So we just used the SharePoint communications site, which Daniel does lots of nice videos on, and various other people in the community over here do. But the one thing I think this proves is how you can create a really good looking site within a couple of hours. And we were just able to take that to our clients and say, look, here's what all the others have done. Do you want one of those? And they just used to say, yep. And which within 2 hours, they had a way to communicate very, very professionally with their staff. So we saw lots of those SharePoint communication sites spun up. Just a quick question there. Is any others there that kind of saw that trend as well, where lots of these communications served a really good purpose and did exactly what they was built to do? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we certainly did, and Knut, who's still on the call, actually, built out a similar template to roll out for partners through a number of different organisations as well. So similar trend over here as well.
Yeah. All right, and then another thing that's probably worth mentioning as well that we saw was there's definitely now a shift away from that kind of parent-child structure which is on the left. So, and that, once again, even today, I had a call with a client who was trying to get their head around that, and they were saying, what do you mean everything's its own site? And obviously, when you create a Microsoft team, when you create a SharePoint site, when you create a team site, or every single one of them is a site collection, right? So there's definitely a shift now away from that parent-child, which is obviously still an option, but Microsoft are definitely pushing everyone towards that hub and associated site model, where you can then kind of aggregate and push up and pull information in between those different aggregate sites. So quite a big deal for some of those kind of records management purists who kind of use that parent and child model. Right, let's talk about Power Apps. So this is like the new kind of, I'm just trying to think how I would say this politely. So Power Apps is like the new trendy cousin, right, who's turned up at the family wedding with the new pair of trainers and the new suit. And I think the reality is the one thing I saw, was the real power of Power Apps. Because of how quickly you could spin up these things. So we actually created a contact tracer app, which was a legal requirement over here, and there's a lot of public entities, a lot of polytechnics, for example, who didn't want to put their information in the cloud where they didn't know where the information was going to go. So we was able to, in most of these cases, we was able to deploy a contact tracing app in less than 4 hours. And we just used the same IP, rebranded it, reskinned it, and that included deployment time and answering a few questions along the way. So it meant, for $700, you had a robust, secure contact tracing app that you could use on your Power Apps network. So we built loads of those, which I'm sure others have done as well. And I suppose the other thing this has been good for us is been able to show the power of Power Apps and how quickly you can embed those into things like Microsoft Teams and SharePoint, etc. So having quite robust applications that look professional that are built in hours was a really good thing that we saw out of the COVID lockdown. Another app I just want to show you as well is this bookings app. So this didn't really get a lot of attention maybe it deserved. So this lets you do things like if you was a garage or a hairdresser's, for example, what it does, it lets you pop in your staff and then lets people book in an appointment with with that particular person, or it could be maybe you don't want a person, you don't care who cuts your hair. So this is a public facing page that you can go and create bookings, which I think that what I understand is Microsoft are now going to push this out as a standard application as part of Office 365, but at the moment you have to go and add it as a free app. But this bookings app's pretty powerful. Now, if you go to the Brighter Days YouTube channel, I've done a video which shows you how to set that up, and relatively easy, all free, part of your E3 license as well. But definitely good if you're looking to manage appointments and how you manage people's time. So let's talk about Yammer. Yammer is like I put the crash test dummy there, but Microsoft keep getting the defibrillator out and giving Yammer a new lease of life. Let's be honest about it. Every time we think it's dead, they kind of give it a new lease of life. But this time I think it is slightly different. So I don't know if anyone's seen this. Once again, I have done a YouTube video on this. But new Yammer is definitely worth paying attention to, simply because if you think about the common need for two-way dialogue, multi-way dialogue to engage those workforces, then Yammer is the tool to do that, right? And generally it's had a bad rep because it was badly rolled out. But one thing I really like about this is it's doing some rich text, do things like previewing, etc., like you do on Facebook and LinkedIn. So here's some GIFs and one of Villanelle from Killing Eve. I don't know if everyone's seen that show, but this is in the Yammer look and feel, and you can now customize the all company feed as well, which you never used to be able to do. But this lets you do things like polls and announcements in a very kind of Facebook social media quite way. It looks pretty nice actually. But the main benefit of this for me is you can now embed that web part and get exactly the same look and feel you can in the new Yammer web part as you can on Yammer. Which, if anyone had used the conversations web part in Yammer versus Yammer, native Yammer, you would know it's quite different. So the fact that you can go and do likes, add images, previews, thumbnails, all within that embedded web part is amazing. And the other thing's probably worth mentioning is you won't have any of the performance issues that you may have seen with the old Yammer web part as well. So huge JavaScript issues and failings in some of those out-of-the-box stuff. So apologies if anyone from Microsoft's on the call, but the new version of the Yammer web part is going to be your friend if you're having to look at performance and stuff like that. So do check out new Yammer, and there is you do have to upgrade Yammer at the tenant level to do that. Home sites, I'm just going to talk about briefly. As I say, they probably haven't really taken off just yet. I think the main purpose we're seeing home site's used for now is to become that Hansel and Gretel go-to place. So a lot of the organisations we work with now are setting, because you can create any SharePoint site you can create as a home site. So a lot of people are now setting their home site as their intranet homepage, so that when you click on the company logo or the SharePoint logo in the top left-hand corner of Office 365, that it then takes you back to that home page and that central kind of landing page. So we've seen a bit of that, and you can also add it as a custom tile, which has been available for a little while now as well. I'll just talk very quickly about modern search. Once again, it's probably worth mentioning not everyone has done this. As of probably a few weeks ago, you still had to be on the targeted release to get the modern search look and feel, which I know a lot of organisations may have moved over to that, but certainly the modern search now is a lot well liked in New Zealand, and we're seeing not many people complain about going to a classic search and refiners, simply because the modern search is pretty good and offers pretty good results as well. Still some improvements, obviously you can't do refiners, etc., but yeah, I think that'll come. But yeah, modern search is very well liked by all of our users. Let's just talk finally about Microsoft Lists as well. So has anyone seen this? I don't think it's popped into many tenants yet, unless you've maybe got a preview or early release. So Microsoft Lists is essentially Microsoft's way of putting SharePoint lists on steroids. But I think you'll be able to see lots of to-do lists and lots of kind of enterprise size, corporate, this is what we need to do, events, that kind of stuff. I think Microsoft List will combined with Power Apps and Power Automate will be pretty good when they come out. I think they said at the end of summer, UK or Europe. Okay, so that's kind of some of the trends we've seen in New Zealand with some of the apps and the new stuff. Any questions so far on that?
We're still all clear, mate. So if anyone's got any questions, just pop them in. Either raise your hand using the Teams functionality, or just pop them in the chat there where we can pick them up, and we'll ask Lee along the way.
Okay. Oh, let's drag that over there. Okay, so let's talk about where did my data go. So we've seen quite a few interesting user behaviors here in Microsoft Teams and SharePoint. So let's just see if this is a common scenario. So you can see here we've got our forms templates, folder library, and what I'm doing here is I'm synchronizing that with my local machine. And so I've got that the hub and form template synchronized with my local machine. How many people go, actually, I'm going to have a bit of a tidy up, personally, I'm just going to go and delete all of that stuff. I don't need that anymore. Yeah, don't really care. I just need to clear it up. Not realizing that they're actually, by doing that, they're actually going and deleting that from the shared location. Anyone else seen that so far? Yeah, so quite a common thing, right? So, and it's probably worth mentioning, if you just click on the site contents, it is in the recycle bin, but you get 91 days, right, to do something about that. Now, that's probably the most common thing we see across all our clients in certainly synchronized libraries. So you might want to be a bit careful how you do that. So let's talk about what you get natively. So 93 days is what you get if that happens. So from the point of deletion, so if typically on day 94, I think you get a couple of weeks grace by Microsoft, but generally, if someone's going to delete a whole site or a whole folder, which is pretty important, that's gone forever. The other thing that's probably worth mentioning is that we see a lot of people migrate stuff over, as is, and then delete it. And then they wonder why they can't delete, because the recycle bin's only allowed 200% of the site collection quota. So there's quite a few things to consider. But deleting stuff and not realising is generally where people are getting caught out. So I think just to looking at native options, version control, you're limited to 100, recycle bins 93 days, deleted emails 14 days, but you can go up to 30. So common things are. We're seeing people just deleting stuff, not realizing they're doing it, and they have quite a high impact, right? So you can restore from Microsoft Backup, but that's only up to 14 days. So huge issues around legal retention. If you got audited and you couldn't find that document, you'd be in big trouble, right? So that's kind of your native options. And generally we see the main things is, I can't find it, the URL doesn't work. The version I've got is corrupted, so that happens still. all those kind of scenarios. And admin people are still doing it as well. So, I've updated the apps, I've broken inheritance because I needed to change permissions, people using, leaving, all of those things are still going on, right? So cause some issues. So it is worth mentioning, this is where, if any of you know Tom Hamid or from AvePoint, he's worth certainly talking to over in Australia. Because we partner with AvePoint, who kind of help us with all this stuff. But it's probably worth mentioning that Forrester will do a really good report about what you don't realise about what's included and what's not, what's your responsibility. So go and check out this white paper if you can, because even though it's kind of 3 years old, it's probably it's quite important about what your responsibilities are. And that's the thing, most people don't realise what you should and shouldn't be able to do. So lots of stuff through hardware, infrastructure failure, which still happens. That's all Microsoft. If it's a natural disaster, they obviously got failover. And if there's any kind of short-term stuff where you've deleted stuff you need to realise straight away, then Microsoft are going to help you out. Where they're not going to help you out is for the following situation. So if someone leaves your company, you've deactivated the account and you didn't realise what you were doing, then that's your fault, right? If someone hacks you, I'm pretty certain Microsoft won't say it's on your own, buddy, but they will say, well, certainly if it's someone who's had access, then that's down to you. Loss of data due to ransomware, same sort of thing, and prolonged outages. So I think the longest outage we've had in New Zealand is probably 2 hours, and we had another one. I think that affected the Aussie data centre about a couple of weeks ago as well, so you may have seen that. But yeah, that could be if maybe your building's down, like Christchurch earthquakes might be an example there. An accidental deletion, all of those things, that's your responsibility as a customer. So Microsoft won't readily shout that out, and they won't shout that from the rooftops. But there's a lot of responsibility on you as an IT provider, and as someone who needs to look after your entity to what you need to store. So how you can prevent that is there's a few ways. Now, Microsoft do have their E5 facilities, which we're going to go through in a minute, but doing an automated backup, regardless of what tool you use, is the safest way to get around that. So if you don't know him already, I say go and speak to Tom at AvePoint, who we partner with. There is other providers like Veeam and those guys, but we partner with AvePoint because they're the best at Office 365 backup, right? So go and speak to them, and that isn't necessarily a huge cost, but it's peace of mind. So having that automated backup, we'd highly recommend, and a lot of the clients we work with have definitely, in fact, all the clients we work with have got some sort of backup. A lot have got AvePoint. Right, so let's work well for less. Has anyone, did you get to see a show over in Australia? Has anyone seen the UK version with the bald guy who's, they look at the family's shopping trolley and see how much they've spent, and typically it's junk food, that kind of stuff. Anyone seen that?
Might be a New Zealand thing, right?
Not the New Zealand one, but anyway, so I really like the idea and concept, because what they say is what they're trying to do is trying to look at, what are people spending, what are they wasting money on, where if they could make some small changes, now they can save quite a lot of money. So these two guys are quite comical, they just have a go at some poor family who's buying loads of sugary foods for their family, etc. But I come up with this idea called work well for less. So one of the big things we're seeing in New Zealand is, and it'll probably be in Australia and everywhere, is cost reduction exercises, right? So like it or not, we need to start saving money somehow. So how are we going to go and do that? So I thought I'd take these guys' approach and then start looking at, well, okay, where are our cost reduction exercises that we've done in Office 365? So one of the things that isn't necessarily an Office 365 feature, but is definitely worth looking at, is these things called dynamic teams. So has anyone seen these? So these are actually an Azure AD premium feature. But what they let you do is they let you manage teams and Office 365 groups, which is where that comes into it, based on someone's properties in their AD profile. So if, for example, you had a Christchurch office, this is our social club. You can see here the membership type by default is assigned, but if you've got the premium features, you can now change the properties of that group to be dynamic based on someone's property. So it might be that their location equals Christchurch. So I can go in there, I can add the property, I can go and say, yep, if their location equals Christchurch, which I'm going to go and do here, put those parameters in, and then just pop that in. And then what will happen then is then the membership of that AD group is then managed by just the properties in people's AD profile, not by an administrator. So every client I speak to at the moment spend heaps of time managing AD groups and that kind of thing. So dynamic teams can save your service desk and your IT team certainly a lot of money through dynamic groups. And then just to show you how that kind of works, if you do have a dynamic Office 365 group, i.e. a team, you'll see there that it says the team has membership via some membership settings. So you won't be able to add or remove users through the interface. So dynamic teams are definitely worth looking at if you haven't done so already. The other thing that's probably worth mentioning is license checks. So once again, almost every client we work with are overpaying on their licenses. Once again, I apologise if there's anyone from Microsoft on the call, but this is the nature of the beast we're in, right? So if you're a business, there's probably a good chance you're probably paying for licenses that you don't use. There's probably a chance you're paying for E3 licenses when you could probably get by with F1 licenses or E1 licenses, whatever you need. So I'd highly encourage anyone who's kind of responsible for trying to cut down some licenses, do a bit of an audit, do a bit of a check. Do you need 100 licenses if you've gone down to 70 users? All these kind of things can be quite significant in terms of saving. I think the biggest saving we made, one client recently, was $6,000 a month just by tidying up their licensing. So it's not to be sniffed at, right? Another area you're probably going to be doubling up on is your app. So I just want to show, but it's quite hard to do, I suppose. I can't show a show of hands, but how many people are still using one of those products in their organisation, even though we're all Office 365 fans and we should be drinking the Microsoft Kool-Aid? The reality is you're probably using one of those in your organisation still, right? And paying for it as well. So Zoom's the obvious one. I don't want to be a Zoom hater because I can see why it's worked, but paying a corporate Zoom license, $20 a user, it all starts adding up. So you don't really probably need that if you've got Teams. And same for Slack and Asana, etc. But do look at those apps to see if you can start turning those off. Even those big organisations like Thornton Hogan, who we work with, were doubling up on Zoom up until recently. And then pages and forms. Now, this is a real simple, quick fix. If anyone knows how to create a Microsoft form, you can go and cut out some really, really intensive paper-driven processes by just going and creating a form. So let's just go and show you how we go and do that at the moment. We're doing a lot of just kind of quick, simple requests. So this is just showing you kind of how you can create some nice looking charts, etc. But if we wanted to go and embed a form for a leave request or some training, for example. So if I just type in here training request, which up until recently was a paper form for one of our clients, this has taken me all of about 15 minutes to create and embed into the intranet site by just using a Microsoft form. That paper form they used to pay a lady probably best part of 4 hours a week. 8 hours in busy times, just to input training requests. So just building that form in the space of an hour, unfortunately, it's reduced her hours a little bit, but it means she can go off and do more productive things. So certainly embedding Microsoft Forms, I guess all of you will hopefully be familiar with those, but you'll be surprised how many forms you can get rid of. Another thing that's probably worth mentioning is just digitizing this stuff. So Power Apps is definitely as I say, going gangbusters in New Zealand. And one client who we work with, which is a big retail client, so they were inputting 75 paper forms for new SKU requests. So, in retail, if you want to launch a new product, you have to have a SKU, which essentially is a code. Because of the nature of their products, they was always getting new products. So it was 75 paper forms, which meant 3,900 a year. So once again, they took an hour to key in manually and was paying roughly $40 an hour. So it was costing them 156 grand just to key in those 75 forms a week, which they didn't think was necessarily a lot. We built an app for 10 grand that's completely wiped out that cost because it's now all done by the user. So can you imagine how many of those forms and those processes exist in those large organizations? There's heaps of them, right? So yeah, anything like that where you keep the ROI, do the numbers on a back of a napkin sometimes, but yeah, 156 grand saving straight away. Okay, so let's just look at some of the good, bad and ugly in Teams. So I presume there's been a lot of Teams content throughout the sessions today and over the last 24 hours. So I'm just going to give you my observation on this. This by no means obviously Microsoft or Brighter Days. It's just from what we're seeing. Okay, so let's look at the good stuff about Teams. So the good news is adoption, because everyone's using it now. COVID-19, everyone's had to use it, and it's a single pane of glass, right? So it looks familiar. I can find my teammates. I can join meetings. But as we said to one client today, they was like, "Oh, Lee, do they have to have that files thing there? Because they're using it for meetings." And they're going, "Oh, I can use it to store some files. Let's go and dump some stuff in there," and that's what's happening. But the good thing is, from a usability perspective, I think Microsoft have got it pretty good, and you can have things like chat and your tasks all in one place. So that's a good thing, right? Familiar surroundings. Other good things, virtual background. So we had to wait a while for that, but the fact we've now got virtual Valo background, and we can have 10,000 people in a team, multi-chat windows. So this was all happening through lockdown, right? And multi-chat windows, as Knut said, 49 people in one pane, fantastic. So Microsoft did the rapid development and how they've been able to keep up with Slack, definitely really good. Another good thing now, once again, I'm happy to share this slide because this gets a lot of good attention, but what do you actually get when you create a team? Well, the good news is you actually get quite a lot, right? So yes, you get a SharePoint site, you get a planner, you get a OneNote book, Power BI workspace. So if you're a team and want to do your reporting in a secure way, you get your own workspace. So that's good. You get a calendar, you get an inbox, you get a calendar, and you get a Teams wiki. So all that good stuff is what happens when you create a team. So that's what a lot of our users don't understand, actually, is that there's so much there, but Teams is just the interface to get to that stuff. And the fact that people use it to converse, and once again, I'm not going to kill you this stuff. You've probably seen the mile of it today, but it's just good to have those targeted conversations. So once again, Brighter Days went all in on Teams, for example, about 2.5 years ago, because everything we do relates to a project. So we have our conversations there, amongst our peers, and we know that for a fact that everything's going to be in the right channel in the right team. So because we have no internal email anymore. So that's all a good thing. And then file sharing, as we mentioned, that's all good as well. So let's look at the bad stuff. So once again, I'd be really interested to know if people agree with me or disagree or kind of spitting feathers whilst they're watching me say this, but let's look at it. Right, so what happens when you turn on Microsoft Teams? So this is what I say is how it happens when you turn on Microsoft Teams. Anyone seen this scene in Gremlins? So basically, they're doing what they want. It's not my living room, by the way, on kids' half term. But they do what they want. They're smoking, they're drinking, they do what they want, right? They don't care. And that's essentially, for me, that's kind of what happens when you just turn on Teams and hope for the best. No rules, you're going to get messed. And that's the reality of what happens when you just turn on Teams. So that's not so good. Another thing that's probably worth mentioning is, you're going to get lots of sprawl. So are they appropriate as well? So we saw one team name this morning, which was called Colin's Christmas Party Prep or something like that. So did that really need to be a team? Maybe, maybe not. And the other thing is probably worth mentioning are always those templates. So yes, Microsoft are going to make it easier for you to go and create teams from a template, but they won't have the records management baked into them. They won't have content types, so they won't have any content as well. So you can get, I think you can get file structures in that now, but they only go so far. So certainly the duplicate teams we see as well. So HR, I think with the record we had was 4 HR teams in the space of 48 hours. And that was all 4 ladies who all worked on the same bank of desks, all set one up themselves. They didn't talk to each other. So, you're going to get lots of duplication. So have some governance. I think the other thing that's probably worth mentioning as well is, it can hurt adoption as well. So your users are going to get really, really frustrated if they're seeing 2 HR teams, and they'll just go back to file shares and emailing, right? Because it's just too hard. And then Teams adoption just dwindles. And we've seen this already. How many people used to hear that saying, "Oh, we tried Yammer once and it didn't really work, 5 years ago, so we don't use Yammer anymore." The same thing is going to happen with Teams if you don't get their stuff right. So already I've heard that saying once or twice. Yeah, we turn Teams on. Yeah, it's just too hard, too noisy, Lee, so we've gone back to email. Already happening. So let's look at some of the native ways to govern Teams. So can you restrict self-service creation? Yes, you can. You can restrict creation of the group, which basically goes and does something ugly in the back end. So you can do that thing, as I mentioned, around dynamic membership as well. So you could say only people in an AD group can go and create that. And automation can do some sort of middleware as well. So that can be through PowerShell. As I say, we've built a provisioning tool that lets users go and provision a team using a logic app that goes and builds all the right things in there. And you can set naming conventions as well, block words, etc. That's all quite the native way to do it. So there is some options there. So ongoing as well, what consideration you want to think about, the bad stuff is you just want to make sure users aren't doing things they shouldn't do. So you can monitor group usage, you can look at things. So do you just say, well, I'm fairly happy with letting users go off and create teams, I'm just going to administer it as well. So that might be something you think about as well. And some of the tools you've got to do that are native as well. So if anyone hasn't seen this already, do go into your Microsoft Office 365 admin area, and there's all of these now new reports. So you can check out OneDrive usage, not just Teams, OneDrive usage, SharePoint usage, Yammer. Yammer, you can even drill down to which user's using it. So do go off and look into your Office 365 Admin Center. There's some really great new reporting tools for monitoring adoption and usage. The other thing that's probably worth mentioning as well is that it's easy to have conversations with your business when they say no one's using it, because you can go, actually they are. 60% of our users are using it at least twice a day. So you're really good ammo to go and have further conversations about what you want to build on your Office 365 world. And then, as I say, you can check by users as well who's using it as well, if they are actually using it. You can do some auditing as well. You can check things like user sign-ins. You can check group activities in Azure AD, but yeah, once again, that's a bit ugly. So non-admins as well, they can also set permissions in the Security and Compliance Center. So if you do have a records manager, they can go in and say, right, this is what I want my users to be able to do. They've got to use these templates, etc. So once again, there are some native options as well. Now, the third one is very hard to do natively unless you go with an advanced product. So retention, expiration, and disposition. So we're getting really into the deep records management stuff here, but this is right. What do we need to keep? What do we need to get rid of? And then what tells us how we do that? So how do we get rid of that information safely? So I'd be interested to know how many people on the call actually, once again, I don't need to know, but how many organisations actually do this stuff automatically and trust the systems to do that? It's very few in New Zealand. Hardly anyone does automatic delete, and what they do is they do a spring clean once every 6 months at best. Most people don't even do that. They just keep everything forever. So 25 years, I think, is the record I've seen of stuff that they wanted to migrate. So native things you can do here. So things like team archiving. So what you can do in Teams is you can actually say, go and make it read only. So things are still discoverable. You can search them, and then it goes and makes you can make the SharePoint site read only as well. So that's quite a nice option for things like project sites. When the project's finished, you may want to just say, right, no more content, which is obviously it's equivalent of making your file share read only, right? Soft delete, you can recover teams and groups within those parameters as I mentioned, but for anything beyond those 14 days for email and 93 days, you probably want to think about a backup and retention, backup and recovery tool to do that. Group expiration, you can do that if it was a named project with a time, you can put that on the Office 365 group. And in retention, you can do it based on the record management policy. So you can do that for a few ways. You can use the advanced features, you can do it by content type, you can do it by labels as well. So you can apply labels based on content as well. So I won't talk too much about archiving the teams, but go and create a fake team and go and try archiving it. And it's quite good to see actually, because you'll see it just freezes all activity in Teams, including the SharePoint site as well. And it just puts a big grey banner over the team saying, sorry, this is archived, you can't do anything about it. But it means it's still findable if users still need to get at the information. Right, so let's just look at some of the plain white ugly stuff in Teams. So once again, I'd love to know if anyone disagrees vehemently about this stuff, but let's look at the stuff that is a bit ugly. Right, let's take search. So this is a common scenario we see with users, right? So I've got all of my teams, some are hidden, I've got them, below the fold, so to speak. And I've got some channels. As Knut said, you probably will know the channel name. But if that's hidden team, that's fine. If I just can go in here, if I just type in a search term, Project Sunrise. So I want to click on Project Sunrise. Now my expectation here is I would see all of the channels for Project Sunrise, but I can't see those. I can only see the general channel. How I get to that is I have to do this really convoluted way by clicking on settings, going channels, and seeing all of that, right? So one of the things I would really hope that Microsoft do is that when you do a search for a team and you pop in Sunrise, it automatically shows all the channels that are in that team. I have checked out user voice, and there's quite a few people having a little whinge about that. But yeah, likewise, the filtering works in the same way. So if you just do a filter, it just goes, if I show you now how you go and filter, it only shows the stuff that, it's in that search. So if you had Sunrise in Project Sunrise is the team name, but it will filter out. It won't show all of the channels in that particular team. So search for me could be improved. Once again, I stand corrected if anyone vehemently disagrees, but it can definitely be improved. Now, private channels, I can see we've actually started disabling private channels for a lot of our large organizations for a few reasons. Now, the biggest one is we just really can't keep track of what's going on in them. The fact that they go and create a hidden Active Directory group, create a separate SharePoint site. So I don't know if anyone has seen that, but when you create a private channel, it's actually creating a completely new SharePoint site. If you don't believe me, go into SharePoint in the private channel, you'll see it's a separate URL. So completely separate site collection that doesn't appear in most places, and they just become a real nightmare to manage and maintain. So use private channels at your peril. If you're a good if you're experienced SharePoint admin, you'll probably be agreeing with me. If you're a user, you'll be disagreeing with me. But yeah, private channels are painful. And also the other thing they don't do is inherit any of the records management or the content types or any of that good stuff that you've probably put into your main site or your main team. So that's another reason why we don't use those. So let's just look at some of the other, just finally, I know it's 6 o'clock, 6:46 on a Friday, probably not what I wanted to be finishing on, but trust me, it's the grand finale. So I'll whiz through this stuff, but hopefully it kind of just tops off some of the, the topics that I've been talking about. So one of the best sayings I heard, and it stuck with me, is record management's a journey, not a destination, right? So it isn't something you just tick the box to say you've done. It's constant because the content's always evolving. So you've got to show that you're on the right track. So Microsoft, though, in those E5 features in that compliance module that I spoke about, if you go to the Microsoft Admin Center and look on the Compliance Center, sign up for a free trial, you can go and test out a lot of this stuff. But things like data connectors now. So this is really cool because what you can do is you can extend your compliance to non-Office 365 and non-Microsoft 365 things. So if you've got a Facebook page, if you've got a LinkedIn company page, you can check that to see if it's, extend that to monitor whether your compliance and your policies are being adhered to. And I think we'll see more and more of those connectors. It might be Facebook, LinkedIn, maybe it's third-party things like Slack. I don't know. It will also let you do things like a compliance score, which will show you, so you can go and press a button and it will tell you how compliant you are. I'll tell you now that Brighter Days tenant should be better than what it is, but it's like the classic builder's house, but we can get better. The trainable data classifications I really like. So this is only going to get better. So this is what this is doing is saying training your system to start looking for content of a certain type. So the automated tools are a little bit hit and miss at the moment. So even if you mention the word credit card, it starts marking that content as automatically sensitive, even if you're just saying, here's our credit card strategy, and it isn't meant. So trainable data classifications, tag this policy with this type of information. If it looks like a driving license, then it's all doable. And things like reports and alerts. So if people are doing stupid things or trying to be non-compliant, you can now have a records manager get alerts notifying them of when those policies haven't been adhered to. So E5 really, once again, this could have its own session, which would probably be an hour in its own right. But just want to talk you through the licensing though in some of this. Now, you can buy the compliance modules as a standalone, but just want to show you, most people now being told by their LARs and their licensing providers that they have to step up to Microsoft 365 E5 licenses to get all this stuff. Let's just show you the difference in that license. It's $56, right? Nearly $56 difference. in the licensing. So you don't need to be a genius. If you're a 1,000-person organisation, paying those $50 per user, and it has to be, you have to have those licenses for everyone as well, by the way. It's not, it's your total license users. So big difference if you're going from Microsoft E3 licenses to Microsoft E5 licenses. As I mentioned, though, you can buy them individually as well if you just want to buy the individual modules. But once again, that has to be for every single license user. Some of the problems we see as well is it's not actually what you know about, it's the stuff you don't know about. So dark data for me is all of these things that have been created where no one knows what's in them. And that's going to be heaps of information, trust me, across your network. So compliance score, as I mentioned, once again, sexy in the fact that it gives you a nice little graph, but it will go and tell you how compliant you are. It will tell you things like password protections, whether you're doing things like your authentication, your multi-factor authentication, that kind of stuff, or if there's improvements you could be making there. The data connectors, as I mentioned, so you can see there Facebook was one, Twitter, so you can even apply it to your Twitter handle or your Facebook, your company Twitter handle, see if people are swearing or saying bad things. Certainly quite prominent, I would say, in the current climate as well with what's going on with global events. And then lastly, as I mentioned, AvePoint do this stuff for a living. They have got some good information around what you get natively versus their product. Yes, there are other providers out there as well, but once again, AvePoint are good guys, and they do support the community work over in APAC. So that's it really. I didn't want to do too much of the compliance stuff last session, Friday afternoon. So hopefully that was useful. And this is more of a brain dump really to show you what's going on in New Zealand and some of those trends. So yeah, be really keen to know if you've got any questions or want me to dive back into some of those things we talked about maybe earlier in the session.
Thanks, Lee. Yeah, so if anyone's got any questions, just unmute yourself and you can ask away, or even just pop them in the chat there if you don't want to use audio, and we can ask Lee. I'll kick it off, Lee. I'd be interested in your opinion there. You were talking about private channels. It's a pretty hot topic at the moment. So in terms of, let's say you've got a team of 20 people or a project team or something along those lines, and a portion of that team need a secure location for maybe 3 or 4 people that's still part of that team. What are you recommending around that approach? A new team, yes, or a group chat, or?
Yes, I think the private channels are still an option. One thing we've done is we've built a tool that injects the metadata and the records management after the event. So still use the private channel, but once again have some. Well, based on what we're seeing our clients do, they still want the records management applied, which if you just did a private channel out of the box, it wouldn't do that. So let them do the private channel, but make sure you're catching them when they're getting created. Yeah,
and are you seeing, I guess, coming out of, you guys are a bit more out of COVID than what we are, but and a lot of organisations have rushed and deployed teams or whether it's SharePoint or whatever it is, really quickly. Are they starting to backpedal now, and is there a bit of a mess to clean up?
Yeah, so we've got we just had a chat with the Christchurch District Health Board, which they went from, I think it was 10 to 1,500 users in 5 days. And have had no governance, and they've got, I think they said there's 3,000 teams they've got created already. So which has got no records management, no, nothing applied to them. So there's 2 options there. They either start again, which might be an option, or we try and retrospectively apply some of that stuff to it, which still might be an option as well. But yeah, unfortunately, as I was saying to them today, I think they're probably not going to realise they've got a problem for at least another year when they can't find anything, right?
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, but definitely, I think, and it's probably stuff below the iceberg as well. There's probably heaps of ones we don't even know about yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Is anybody still on the call that's got any questions? Shoot away. If not, then we shall end the session. Thanks again, Lee. That was a really good presentation, mate, and appreciate your time. I know it's late there, Friday night. As you said, you're probably better off somewhere else, but no, I appreciate your time. It was a good session. Quite a few attendees there, so I hope you brought some value, obviously. Yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah, no worries. And as I say, if anyone wants to get in touch, needs some of those slides, then by all means, just get in touch. And as Knut said, I'm available on LinkedIn and usual channels. So yeah, give us a shout if you get stuck.
Yeah, publish the video as well. So if people need to look back on it, we'll make that available as well.
Cool. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good day, and yeah, take care.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers. Bye.